Good morning. The August 30th meeting of the Referrals Committee will come to order. Could you call the roll, please, Ms. Starley?
Councilmember Ravel? Here. Mayor Biss?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
With 3 members present, we have a quorum and are ready to do business. Is there any member of the public, either here in the room or who's communicated electronically, who is seeking to give public comment? Seeing none, we now move on to item 4, the review and scheduling of referrals. I would suggest that we, as per usual, begin by going through the new referrals that have arrived since our last meeting and go through our scoring process. The first on the list in front of me, and today's are all from Councilmember Burns. The first on the list in front of me relates to anti-displacement and anti-gentrification efforts, a referral to create a here-to-stay task force. Does anyone want to speak to their scoring of this?
I'm happy to start. Actually, so I did not score this one because we had the same conversation last time about making a task force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a task force, so maybe I'm wrong, but a subcommittee that would need to be made by whatever committee it came out of. But maybe I'm wrong since it's a task force. I don't know if we have the ability to do that in this referral committee or that needs to be done elsewhere.
I did score it, but I was perplexed in the same way. You know, this could be a committee, could create a subcommittee of, I suppose I could appoint a special committee or something. I'm not sure that we would need a resolution to create a task force, which is what this, as a referral, would seem to be. Councilmember Ravel, do you have any reaction to that question?
Well, with the subcommittee that was basically going to be part of planning and development, there was a logical committee to move ahead and approve the subcommittee. So I guess the question is, is there an existing committee that for whom this would be a logical subcommittee? I don't know, Human Services?
Well, let me ask a different question as the ignorant newcomer around here. Obviously, this city has had no shortage in its life of special task forces and working groups to work on things. Ordinarily, how do those get created? And I guess it's a question for either of the council members who's been here longer than me or for the city manager.
Yeah, typically, the mayor would appoint a committee based on feedback either from the public or from council members.
And I think one of the most recent ones is the Alternative 911 Committee, which, Cicely, you identified committee members and then the mayor appointed them. Is that correct?
Right, but that started off of the conversation we had in Human Services.
In Human Services, right.
We had a few conversations and we decided it was kind of too much for Human Services, and so we made a subcommittee. So yeah, I thought they've always been, either the mayor made them or they came out of another committee that made this kind of short-term task force or what have you. So I thought this might be a good one for either P&D or for the Affordable Housing Committee. Now, I don't know if we can make a committee of committees. That seems a little confusing. And I know for the Affordable Housing Committee has had some frustrations with, their members just and with the pace of things. So I don't know that they're interested in taking on something else, but it definitely, I guess in my mind, did not seem like the work of this referral committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, at the moment, the committee that I think is going to be handling affordable housing is the Housing and Community Development Committee. So I don't know, anyway, that's.
Well, let me go to Councilmember Burns and indicate those various options and try to figure out whether any of them might be the best path forward. And that brings us to the next one that I also had some questions about for opposite reasons almost, which is about separating the two parcels, one of which we're currently on, for the purposes of not having the parkland adjacent to the Civic Center be a part of the proposed TIF. So my reaction to this was, wow, I thought that there was a kind of a clear commitment made to do this at the council meeting that occurred in early July, right? And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say that staff is already working on that as a regular course of business, so I'm not sure if there's a need for it to be a formal referral.
And can you just speak to the timing? I mean, in terms of when that would be ready, and is the plan then to make that a special order of business so it could go quickly? I mean, it's got to be done before the TIF gets voted on, correct?
The TIF is going to be in front of the council in September. I'm not sure how fast we can do this, but we'll see if we can get a time frame that aligns with that. But if not, I'll let you know.
Okay, but this is moving at the speed that it can move, and so there's sort of nothing for us to do with it. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
And is it possible, assuming the council approves the TIF, to amend the boundaries afterwards?
Yes, my understanding is you can.
Okay.
Or maybe even, and I don't know if this, I'm not a TIF supporter, but even if this is possible to say in the TIF excluding the park. I mean, I talked to Council Burns about this because it's, as you know, a county function to separate bins. But maybe we can also put some language in the TIF of minus the park, which will be, separated at the county by the end of the year or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a TIF expert, and nor do I support this effort, but those are my 2 cents. But
I mean, I'm also not a TIF expert at all, but it seems to me that the reason for separating them is ultimately if you have the TIF, you've got to calculate increment, and you can't calculate increment in a region smaller than what the county is assessing. So if the county assesses the whole property, and then if it were sold and there were an actual increment in the tax collected, that's just a lump of money, and we'd have no tool to divide that lump of money into two lumps, one for the Civic Center and one for the park. And so I can't speak to what could be done retroactively, but I think like if the thing passes and it's up and running, it's too late unless the county is actually assessing the two things separately.
so then what you're saying is we should not move forward with the TIF, and this is a whole different conversation before this is separated. Sounds like what you
What I'm
think is
saying
that.
confidently is the TIF shouldn't be up and running before these things are separated.
Okay.
What that says about the procedural questions and the order of operations is not something that I feel knowledgeable enough to speak to. But like once there's actually a TIF and money coming into it and the increments being calculated, by that point you better have this work already done.
Well, my understanding, the clock is ticking in terms of our need to approve or not approve the TIF. We have to do it by the end of September, so. And my interest in making sure that the park is clearly going to remain a park is, we're talking about a 23-year TIF, and this council and the next council will be remembering that, yes, this is sacred parkland, but 20 years from now, people's ideas might change. And so we do want to codify this somehow.
Oh, I think we absolutely have to. I
Yeah.
think the question that a council member who is inclined to vote yes on the TIF, but concerned about this issue is confronted with is the question of, does the final vote on the separation of the parcels need to occur first? And that's a conversation for council members to have with with those who are advocating for the TIF and looking for 5 votes. But I think just as you indicate that it's hard to trust a hypothetical council 16 years from now to remember these conversations we're having now, someone might even take a more aggressive posture and say, I don't trust anything, I'm not going to vote for the TIF until this is. And so if people say that, that'll go into the calculation about how quickly this separation would have to move from the point of view of those who are trying to pass the TIF. But anyway, I think we've gotten clarity from staff that it's moving as fast as it can, and I think that means that our work here is done. Is there anything you want to add?
I was just going to add that we can put a resolution on the council agenda for the 13th, acknowledging that there is a desire for the park to remain a park. And by the passage of that resolution, that may alleviate some concerns about this topic. But it is possible. I'm just not able to say it absolutely will happen.
Understood.
That it will be separated by the time we meet, but that's what we're working towards.
And just to help me understand the timing, the TIF would require 2 votes, correct?
Yes, correct.
So the real deadline is
27th.
not the 13th, but the 27th. Okay. All right. That brings us to eviction notification. So to the passage of an ordinance requiring landlords to notify the Health and Human Services Department about an eviction 30 days in advance. I'm not sure I agree with my own score here, but go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to jump in with my score.
Yep.
Time, I gave it a 1, scope 2. These might be out of order on the sheet, anyway, policy 3, goals 1, and interest 2 for a score of 9.
And I think my scores are pretty much like Cicely's. 1 for time sensitivity, 2 for scope, 3 for existing policy, a 2 for community interest, and a 2 for goals and priorities, whatever that makes, whatever. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
That looks like
10. It's a
10 to
10.
me. And so, yeah, so the 2 of you agreed for most of them. And then the one where you didn't quite agree, Councilmember Fleming said 1 for community interests, and Councilmember Revelle said 2, and I will say I do agree with the 2 for that. So let's just go with everything you agreed with on the 4 you agreed, and then I'll be the tiebreaker on the one where you had a slight disagreement. And so that gives it a 1 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, a 3 for connection to existing policy, 2 for community interest, and 2 for goals and priorities, adding up to a 10. Okay. So next is requiring the city to disaggregate MWEBE minority data. Somebody want to go first?
I can go. I will say, like the other one, to me, this seems like something we can just direct staff to do. That it doesn't need to be
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I've only been to one MWEBE committee meeting so far as a new member, and we haven't had a whole long data discussion, but it seems like Sharon would be capable of doing this without
Right.
an entire policy
Right.
made. But I did score it since it's here. So I gave it a 3 for time, 2 for scope, 3 for policy, 2 for interest, although maybe it's the 1, but, and then 1 for goals, so a score of 11.
And I had a 3 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, a 2 for existing policy, a 2 for community interest, and a 2 for goals and priorities.
Which looks
But I
like,
agree, but I agree with Councilmember Fleming that this, in the normal pre-referral days, this would have just been, come up during the committee discussion
Yeah.
and get handled there.
no, I agree with that. Erica, is there a reason why this is, I mean, I think it's obvious this is a good idea, right? Like we can all agree what's beneficial about this. Is there a reason why it's difficult to either gather the data this way or keep the data in this way or report the data in this way?
I would have to consult with Sharon. I don't know exactly what difficulty level this would be, but it does seem to me something that we could just request staff to do.
Because if you look at the chart that we get in our packets, it shows, when it tells how much of the contract is going to go to a woman-owned business and minority business and Evanston business. I mean, it's almost as though that data is just asking to be aggregated.
Yeah, the only concern I would have is if there's some kind of legal requirement that we don't or do not disclose that information.
And I think the other part, just from my tracking of this kind of issues, is that so Sharon knows who she's referring to job sites based on her pool of people, so she can, do some more data collection there. But when employers are telling us they've hired X, Y, and Z, I would just be concerned I mean, I don't know, I mean, I guess they can report everything, but I'm not sure just with the HR rules, how much they can then report on someone, because some of those things, like when you fill out a job application, are self-reporting. So I just don't know, like Bully and Andrews for Robert Crown, if they say 50% was minority, if they're able to really flesh that out in a legal manner. I mean, they probably are. I'm not an HR expert, but I know gender and race sometimes are optional on job descriptions.
Yeah, I mean, I think employees and probably can't be compelled to give that information, but, you know, ownership as a condition of bidding certainly can.
Right, but then are they guessing? So if I fill out an application and I don't write my race on there, and then the employee needs to then say, okay, as a contractor with the city of Evanston, I have this many minorities, and I haven't disclosed my race. I mean, obviously he can guess, but he might not actually know. And I might be too far down in the weeds there, but
Wouldn't the owner of the company that's bidding, putting in a bid for the contract, want to make it clear that they would be meeting that requirement?
no, I think
Okay.
they should make it clear, and they want to make it clear, and that we do get those reports. I'm just not sure if staff are not required to put their race and gender on an application form, yet as the employer, I'm saying I have 50% minorities. Some of that might be guessed based on how you look,
Right.
which is maybe just how it is.
Well, because our requirement just goes to the owners, at the ownership level, and we don't ask beyond that. So is this what we're
But
trying?
where's the owner getting the information from? They're getting it from the employees, right?
I thought it was looking purely at the ownership level and not whether there were.
Oh, no, this is looking at, Eric, am I correct? This is looking at the staff, right? Don't we also calculate, like the Bully and Andrews, part of their contract was that they'd have so many minority, but Evanston-based staff on the job site?
Right. I can guess that that's where he's going with this, but there's not enough specification in the information that was provided.
No,
But
no, no,
normally
there's
with
a
that
factual
stuff-
question. What is currently collected?
Oh, from Sharon for this purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a disagreement here about whether we're collecting information about the ownership exclusively or the ownership as well as the workforce.
Well, if the city is supplying the residents who are going to be interviewed to participate, then we know a lot of data about our own participants, as was discussed. But if this is about what the contractors are providing on the job site, then we're relying on them to provide that data. And I'm not sure what level of detail that data provides.
But it's the workers, right? Not the we're not asking Bully and Andrews, for example, how many people in your executive suite are of this minor. We're asking how many on the work site.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we can. All right. So let's hold back from doing anything referral-wise here and see if we can just spur this to occur. But it does seem like it should occur. I mean, it seems like the use of the word minority is probably a holdover from an era when the assumption in Evanston was that minority meant black. But I think that we don't live in that world at all anymore, and it seems like we shouldn't just have aggregated data. Okay, so let's move forward to the Victim Services Fund to pay for emergency hotel rooms and other relevant expenses.
So I gave that one a 3 for time, a 3 for scope, 3 for policy, 1 for interest, and a 3 for go at a 13. I also will say that I think this is one that, I mean, I feel like we do this already. There's probably not a very clear policy on how we do it, because I know we've done it before from my recollection from Human Services and from Affordable Housing Fund, so we probably do need some clarity around that. I think my question I wasn't sure about is this is talking about just creating a whole separate fund of money, I assume, But I would hope that we also are going to make a policy to go around who qualifies and how long you can stay in a hotel and all those kind of things, because I know this has been, different people have gotten different allotments of hotel funding. So I would like a policy more so than a fund.
Yeah, I mean, I talked with Councilmember Burns about this today, and I had also helped him intervene to find some funding to house family members of victims of a crime just a few months ago. And I think I think you're very much speaking his language, that there's neither a set aside pool of money nor a clear, or at least in his experience, clarity to the policy. And we probably ought to have both. My question for him was, do we need in the legal sense, a new city fund? Because it wasn't clear to me why that would be the case either. And it seemed like his inclination was yes. But again, I think the more urgent question here is, do we have a clear policy that can be applied consistently and access to adequate funding to implement that policy?
I gave it a, quote, better score for time sensitivity, because I mean, this should probably be part of the budget discussion potentially, if we're talking about either creating a new fund or making sure there's enough money in our existing emergency funds. So I gave it a 2 for time sensitivity and a 2 for scope, and a 2 or a 3 for existing policy, a 1 for community interest, and a 2 or a 3 for goals and priorities. Kind of a little wishy-washy there.
Well, what's particularly aggravating is that for the 2 where you gave it a 2 or a 3, one of us gave it a 2 and one of us gave it a 3.
Whoops.
So we're truly on the fence here. So I give it a, quote, better score than both of you, actually. I give it also a 2 for time sensitivity. I give it a 1 for scope, which seems to be completely out of left field compared to everyone else, so I acknowledge that. I gave it a 2 for connection to existing policy, a 2 for community interest, and a 2 also for alignment with our goals and priorities, which added up to a 9, which is sort of not where everybody else was, really.
I was roughly a 9.
Yeah, roughly. So, I mean, if we sort of average things out, it gets a 2 for time sensitivity, a 2 for scope, I think a 3 for connection to existing policy, a 1 for community interest, and I don't know. I mean, I guess a 3 for connection to goals and priorities, and that gives it an 11.
Okay.
And this brings us to the create an MOU with Shorefront Legacy. Does someone here want to go first?
This is another one I did not score. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah. I also don't know what it means. Do you know what it means, Erica?
I think where he's coming from this is, if there was some kind of official partnership between the two entities, then it might be more feasible for Shorefront to obtain grant funding for certain things. I also know that there was some interest in having some kind of exhibit, potentially at Gibbs Morrison or something else. So these are just conversations that I've had with Councilmember Burns. I don't know exactly what he's looking for in this, but I think he would foresee formalizing the relationship between the two entities in the hopes that it would be advantageous to both.
And I mean, that makes sense, except is there a relation? I mean, obviously, there's a sort of is there a,
Do we do this kind of
Well, no, I mean, I guess, we enter into an MOU if there's an agreement to share the responsibility to provide services or provide one service in exchange for another, or if money is changing hands. But is there a thing that's occurring in the relationship between the city and Shorefront Legacy that fits any of those categories that might require formalization?
That's what we would need to find out. What exactly is the MOU going to bind both parties to? I don't know that there's any pressing need at this point, but I could just be unaware. So more direction from
All right.
this. But the alternative could be we could just put it on an agenda at some future date, discuss previous partnerships the two entities have had, and then discuss what potential future partnerships could exist or could be, and maybe get more direction then, or get more direction now and then make it easier to prioritize.
But with the MOU, it wouldn't be for like just all things in general. We usually would lay out an MOU with this, what it is, right? So even if he feels like making this MOU just in general is going to help Shorefront, we still would need to fill it with some kind of deliverable.
Absolutely.
So then that might be this one thing as an art project, and then we make another MOU for a whole other thing, right? It wouldn't just be this. Yeah, so maybe you can.
Okay. And then lastly, it leads us to the lead pipe replacement workforce program.
So I gave that one a 3 for time, a 3 for scope, a 1 for policy, a 2 for interest, and 1 for goals, so a score of 10.
Well, I give it a 1 for time sensitivity, just because we are really talking about lead pipe replacements, and a workforce training program would need to get started soon if it's going to be useful. I gave it a 2 or a 3 on scope. On this one, it's hard to know, developing a workforce training program, we're talking a lot of staff resources. If it's merely discussing, do we want to do it, maybe not so much. So I didn't quite know what to do about that. 3 for 2 for existing policy, 2 for community interest, and 1 for goals and priorities. And I did happen to have a conversation with Ina Gutierrez at Rebuilding Warehouse. So the lead pipe replacement job is a union job. So I don't know how that fits into this. So anyway, she's talking about some kind of, I think maybe coming to us for ARPA funds to do some kind of workforce training around this issue.
Got it. So I also gave it a 1 for time sensitivity, not only because of what you said, but also because of the other thing you said, which is that I think this fits really critically into the ARPA discussion. I also gave it a 3 for scope. It is, I think it's a huge project. Great project, but huge project. 1 for connection to existing policy, 2 for community interest, and 1 for goals and priorities, which adds up to an 8. And I asked Councilmember Burns kind of, is this already underway? Meaning that I heard, I know that the Economic Development Committee is talking about stuff like this in connection with, they're trying to figure out how to allocate the ARPA funding. And his reaction was sort of no, and it was exactly your point, that because these are union jobs, there's a whole kind of different process that we would need to engage with. So I don't know, Erica, if you have any reaction to sort of where this, I mean, if we really wanted, this is not sort of a, this is not like it's a big project and if it's too much, we'll do it halfway thing. I mean, this is either kind of go all in on this effort or don't. I mean, do you have thoughts about where it would live, how it would interact with existing, presumably state mandated way that this work is bid out and all that?
There's been a lot of discussion about this with staff. I know that there is a broader discussion about lead pipe replacement that will come to the council in September or October, I can't remember which, but as we prepare the budget for next year, understanding how much we're going to try to attempt to make progress on this and how much the city council would like us to attempt to make progress on this will be key to setting that budget for next year. So I think we could tie that in together with this broader discussion and talk about if there's a possibility to expand any kind of workforce development around the topic. That probably make the most sense to discuss all of those things at the same time. So I can find out when that is going to council and see if we have time to do both at the same time.
Great. So I think to just kind of average it out, I think it would wind up with a 2, a 3, a 1, a 2, and a 1, which add up to 10.
For time sensitivity, what did you end up?
I gave it a 2.
I'm fine to defer to you all with the,
Okay. All right. Well, then that makes it a 9. No, I don't. I used to be really good at addition, and then it all just sort of fell apart. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm only adding 5 numbers, each of which are less than or equal to 3, but whew, it's tough out here. That makes it an 8 in that case. But again, with the caveat, so we've scored it, but the next step is to hear from Erica about when this conversation was planning to come to council anyhow, and whether we can integrate this aspect of it, which I think would be not only more efficient, but also a more useful way to make progress. So that ends the scoring process. One thing that I realized we have not done is not only for these items, but also for a few of the ones that we scored last time as well, we have not actually said where they would go. So perhaps we should go back and do that. So the first is increase council member compensation to a living wage. I assume that's got to be the Rules Committee, right?
yes.
Okay. The next is a fair work week ordinance. Where do we do
that
sort
would-
of worker protections?
Is it HSC or APW? We usually do HR stuff at HSC?
It's not HR though. This is a work week ordinance for.
Oh, for not our workers.
Yeah, for retail workers and stuff.
Right. I mean, it could go to Human Services and then flow through to APW just for more discussion. There's probably going to be more time for it to be, if it goes that way,
Okay.
versus if we try to put it on APW, there's not much time.
Yeah, I think Human Services makes sense. So let's do that. Then this is the one about the Corporation Council being appointed by council. That obviously is rules again, I assume. Speak up
Yes.
if I'm messing up here. Then there's the Evanston voter initiative process, also rules. So now we arrive at today's, and I'm only going to go over the ones that we did score. The first is the eviction notification. Is that Human Services also? Okay, great. The next is the Victim Services Fund, which I assume must be Human Services, right? No?
I don't really know, because I guess it could start there, then it maybe go to APW for the money.
And then now, this is the tricky one, the lead pipe replacement program. I initially thought it'd be economic development, but I think that's sort of missing out on a whole important piece of it. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts about that.
What is that missing out on?
Or part of council, part of the bigger council.
Right.
For discussion.
Right. It's missing out on both the mechanisms that we use today in our Public Works Department, as well as the kind of interacting with the union regulations. Right, so I would hate to have a whole big detailed thing at economic development that concludes, let's do this, and have that siloed off from all of the sort of, anybody who controls the logistical questions that could really get in the way here.
So then where would you put it, B&D? Or,
I don't know, I'm just the mayor.
I mean, if it's water stuff, then usually that goes to, I mean, I think this fits so many different buckets, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, it's a lot of, I mean, I think that's why Erica made the point that if we could start at city council, that might make more sense. Is that right, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I would probably suggest would be a special order of business.
Okay, so I'll leave it blank for now. We'll wait to hear back from you as to whether it makes sense to put it in council. If so, that'll resolve our issue. If not, we'll have to figure out a perhaps more challenging plan B.
I mean, I think a special order business probably makes sense because it's so many different.
It's so many different things, and again, it's a big choice. And again, it's something I'm really excited about, but it's not a small thing. It's, either go all in on a big project or say, too bad, we don't have the tools to do this right now. So that brings us, we've now had scoring conversations and kind of venue conversations about everything. I will say that there's a pretty big backlog at this point. I'm happy to go through and see if there's anything that we want to kind of make a timeline recommendation for that we didn't so far. But I'm conscious of the extent of the backlog that's accumulated here. So does anybody want to jump in with?
Well, does it make sense we talked about following up with all the committee chairs and kind of seeing where things were? Should we discuss that to see if there's been any movement?
Yeah, sounds great.
I mean, not that I have any movement to report. So I took.
Go ahead, Councilman.
I took several, so I wanted to remind myself what those were. So, and what I did was I talked to, I think I had most Councilmember Burns. So I spoke to him to get clarity, then I spoke to the committee chairs, and then I sent an email. So I had review of landlord-tenant process. So I sent an email to Dave, because he's the staff for AP&W, and Peter, or Councilmember Braithwaite. Anyways, this is what the referral is. Please prioritize it. It's been on the list for a while. These are things that were requested in the staff memo. And then the same with the MWE local hiring requirement. Sent that one also to Sharon. And then I think I had one more, which was, the landlord-tenant process. I had forgotten to loop Johanna Knighton in that one. She said that was going to be coming before us for the affordable housing meeting on 9/20. So that one actually is on the calendar. And then the last one was from Councilmember Kelly. It had to do with the no raising the property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that one to also AP&W, I sent it to them, and also copied Hitesh because she wanted a very simple memo, which was just talked about 5 or 10 years worth of property tax increases and what those amounts have been. So, and I also asked them to prioritize that, also taking in consideration the budget conversations that were coming up. But hopefully that one can be pretty fast, since the memo was essentially just, should be kind of cut and paste from some kind of data spreadsheet we have in the finance office.
Great. And did you get any feedback as to when in fact those things might get on agendas?
I have not. My goal in my calendar is today to follow up with those chairs to see where they were.
Great. Cool. Thank you. Councilmember Ravel?
So I don't have my list of my assignments, so
I think you went to P&D
I had
and there were
for
4
P&D,
items.
Right.
So one, do you want me to read them off to you?
Yeah, please, thank you.
So one is the board up policy.
Right. So I sent an email to Chair Wynn and Johanna Knighton, and I heard from Johanna about the status of the 4. So the board up policy, she's been in communication with Councilmember Burns, and that's kind of in progress. So there were 2 that were like that in progress. What's the next one on that?
The property standards complaint process and operation.
I think that's going to be referred to the P&D subcommittee.
Great. And then increasing fines for occupancy-related violations.
And that would be as well.
And then finally, the one that none of us could
Right,
remember what it
that's the one,
meant.
that's
the
one
overlay zone one.
we don't know what that means yet.
Oh, we still don't, okay. Great. So I had two committees. One was Parks and Rec Board. This was the referral to create an urban farm on the parcel adjacent to Twiggs Park. The chair was very excited that, I put the chair and Councilmember Burns in touch, but I think the expectation is that will go onto an agenda very quickly. There seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm. And then economic development. So there were two. One was the bearing of ComEd transmission lines, and one was options to make downtown Evanston more walkable. Economic development is meeting very, very soon. Of course, those won't make it onto that agenda, but there seemed to be a lot of openness to put these on an agenda very soon, perhaps even the next meeting that occurs after the one that I guess is maybe tomorrow or something. So I can sort of check back in on those, which were those were more sort of, hey, great, rather than we're sort of leaping into action the second. But there did not seem to be unlike APW and P&D, there didn't seem to be a big kind of backup that would make it challenging to get those scheduled. So I'll put on my list just circling back on those. Is there anything else substantive we want to talk about today?
I think the only question I had was just about, like, if we need to fine tune that process, right? So we're doing the scoring and stuff pretty well, but it seems like, things are still a little bit slow to move, and then it's requiring, it wasn't a ton of time, but I had to call Peter, I had to call Bob, it takes some time even from the scoring part to fleshing out things, to getting it, and then I'm going to follow up with them. And so I'm just concerned with the amount of referrals that we're getting and the amount of time it's taking past the scoring to actually track things getting on the agenda. It's a lot of time, or it's more time than I guess I thought it would be. So I don't know if there's a way we can, once we do our work here, get some kind of process for getting it over on the agenda. And I don't have a suggestion of what that is. I just realize it takes a little hand-holding.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know, and again, this might be something Erica can give us some insight into. Kind of at what point does the sort of intake into the agenda building become a sort of automated thing? Pardon me. Where we can say, okay, we've done our work. It's now on the conveyor belt.
Right. I think we have to think about this a couple of different ways. The first is refining the front end of the process. Like, is there a better way to put the referrals in, potentially have staff look at them before they come to you, gather additional information so that once you guys meet, you can actually make a decision about them because all the information is there that you need, versus having them put into a system, nobody looks at them, and then you have to make a decision or score them based on some incomplete information. Then there's the second part of that, which is a lot of these referrals, when they come in, there should be some conversation between the person making the referral and staff so that there is some concept of what's trying to be achieved. And that once that concept has been refined, then you can put the referral in knowing exactly what it is you're trying to get to. Like the shorefront thing, like that's a good example. Like that should be, like I know staffs had conversations about that, but what we received wasn't, completely flushed out. And similar to the board up policy, the board up policy has been in discussions with Councilmember Burns and several different departments for months. Fire's had to weigh in, a bunch of different people have had to weigh in, but it's not ready to be put on an agenda yet because there isn't a, final conclusion amongst those three different departments about whether or not this is even something that we can do. So I think as this continues to evolve, we can refine both the front-end process and the back-end process. Once something's been prioritized, it would be ideal if it could get on an agenda within the next couple of months. Now that we've got such a backlog of things, and they're all important, every one of them has been deemed to be important, but we have ARPA that's should be taking up a large portion of our time, and we have the budget discussion coming in a month. There's realistically just not any time slots to talk about some of these things, especially at P&D and APW. Some of the other committees have some capacity, but so we have to just also set an expectation that if you put a referral in today, the likelihood is it's probably not going to get to till after the first of the year. And that's just based on the fact that we have, 5 more council meetings between now and the end of the year plus budget meetings. So
Yeah, no,
there's-
I completely agree with all that. And I think all that's really important kind of advice. I guess I have no commentary on the speed. It's more a question of the automation, right? So I think to Councilmember Fleming's point, it's at what point can she sort of let go and know that, hey, it might not be on the agenda until 2027 at the rate we're going, but it's on, like, it's just in the queue, it's going to happen. It's not going to get bumped. It's not going to get forgotten. It's going to appear on an agenda as soon as possible and not get sort of shunted aside or need continued negotiation. Because I think her point is, if there's like 8 different times that we've got to check in and negotiate and nudge, that becomes a burden. Whereas if there's 1 or perhaps 2 times, it's a totally manageable thing. So that's the question. It's kind of when it becomes a done deal that we can just sort of blissfully declare to be somebody else's problem.
Once it's been green-lighted to be prioritized from the referrals committee, and that communication has taken place between the committee and the committee chair of whatever committee it's going to, that's the point at which I think you can successfully say it's been handed off. Once it's in the committee chair's hands, it's up to the committee chair to get it on the agenda in conjunction with staff.
But given, and not to be picky here, but given the fact that we have this backlog and that people are chair committees for relatively short windows, there's that additional hiccup potential where we communicate with the committee chair and then somebody else's chair before it would become a live issue. And so that's where I think the communication with staff becomes really critical.
Mm-hmm. So maybe my question is twofold. Is there someone, and maybe not the direct city manager, or this can be your role, but so we're trying to do some of this, screening, and I'm happy also, I think, for me in this role, talking to the not committee chairs, talking to the council member, putting the referral in, kind of fleshing it out is helpful for me because I've heard it directly from them. And then maybe we just don't have, they know it's going to the referral committee versus whatever they might be thinking. And then, so I'm happy to do that legwork and then do the scoring here and all the stuff we do here, and then passing it to somebody who then is going to work with committee chair, passing a complete project off to the committee chair and a staff who are then going to follow it through. Because I think some committee chairs are going to be more aggressive and say, okay, these things are in the hopper, let me get them on the agenda. Some committee chairs, quite frankly, are just going to wait for your office to say, here are 5 things that need to go on the next agenda, right? That we just have different skill sets and timing. So it would be nice if we had a staff member who I can say, okay, Councilmember Burns, all of these things have been referred out of rules or out of referrals. They're going to these committees, like, right? And then someone else takes it from there, because I just don't know what's coming on the P&D agenda for the next 3 months to really have any say-so with that chair of when these things should be on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I mean, for people who are watching at home, we put out the Friday packet every Friday. It has what's coming up on future agendas. We're trying to get all parties to put all items in there as soon as they're aware of them, so we have an expectation of what's coming down the pipe for the next 3 months-ish. I can't assign a staff person to follow up on all of these things. I just don't know who that would be right now, because I was thinking it would be somebody who is now going to be leaving. So
what if we did this? Because I look at the Friday city manager's report, but probably most average Americans are not looking at that. And I had asked Emma last time, like, maybe that's something that we can have a link for in the referrals committee, just that one piece, so people who are paying attention kind of know that there's a flow of things. But does it make sense when we're then kind of sending things out of this committee to send it to whoever is also doing, I don't know who compiles that piece of it, but send it to someone who can then pop these in there so that they are actually on the queue and on the waiting, like out of our spreadsheet and somewhere else. And if we need to keep doing the like nudging of the committee members, we can. I just don't know how much say I have and what, Councilmember Kelly's putting on her agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, at the risk of putting, at the risk of having an unorchestrated conversation and then maybe paying for it later, I want to, also say, as I did a few weeks ago, we just hired a policy coordinator who I don't know, I can't speak to the back end of the technical process and what the right kind of parceling out of which exact kind of technical step to whom is, but I think that's a person who I would hope could be very helpful in this process. And so, again, I don't think that right here on the fly at 10:28, we should just, just kind of hand out a giant new task. But I think as we're trying to figure out how to work through this, that's a resource that we should deploy.
Thank you. Totally makes sense to me.
All right, so here's my last part of my question, my argument. Can we, as the committee, and I'm happy to start this process, kind of lay out, because I think it's been confusing for others to like lay out what our process is. I mean, now we have the scoring sheet, we have this, but again, everyone's not paying attention. And so maybe we can start working on like an ideal flow chart, and happy to work with Ally on this, but an ideal flow chart for everyone. Because I think in speaking to Councilmember Burns, I think I spoke to him about something you had spoken about, so then he was like, well, where's the thing, right? And so I think we need to have some clarity, which we're working on, but maybe written for folks as well.
Yes.
And I was thinking was at some point, probably pretty soon, the committee needs to report, I guess, to the referrals committee about the process. And also we could take that opportunity to help council members understand, because we had a couple of items that came to us today that we decided really didn't need to be made as a referral. So maybe some kind of, here's a type of thing that you can just, bring up in a regular committee meeting versus sending it as a referral. So that could help streamline a little bit.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And also you sort of politely didn't point out that the next Rules Committee meeting is very, very soon. So at a minimum, I think we need to report back verbally. Councilmember Fleming, if you're comfortable starting some sort of something in writing that we could work on together.
Sure, I have endless amounts of time. And I realized I said that because to me, I was like, I need something. So yes, I will start on some kind of flow chart thingy that we can all edit and figure out where we still have things to plug in.
Okay, and we should, and again, again, I just volunteered you because you volunteered yourself.
No, I did. I should not have, but I did. So I'm happy to do that.
And yeah, just put something quick together that we can then give time to as well, so it's not all on you. And then Erica, that we should definitely have an agenda item on the Rules Committee meeting, which is just a update from the Referrals Committee.
Okay.
And then Erica, I'm sorry, for the city manager report that does have kind of the upcoming agenda items, is that like an Asana thing?
It is, and it's been challenging to get it to be in a format that can be exported, but
Oh, okay.
we're working on it, and it's just not ideal. Like, we're trying to find other alternatives that we could use instead of that could be more seamless between inside and outside. And
So it doesn't have like a direct link, you'd have to link to the city manager's report and then just kind of scroll through at this point? Or is there a direct link just to that document?
it's more of like a website, and we have to like export it into something that
Oh,
makes,
okay.
and then delete a bunch of stuff, and it's just
Oh,
kind of
okay.
wonky. Works
Sounds
well.
amazing.
Well, it works well for certain things, but not for others. So I think we need to
Yeah.
figure out something else.
Anything else? In that case, I have one last thing. In keeping with what has become an unfortunate tradition of our committee, I'm going to need to request that we move our next meeting. I'm actually going to be flying out of town on the morning of Thursday the 16th. I would offer I'm extremely flexible on Wednesday the 15th, the previous day. I believe I could make anything work prior to 7 p.m. that day.
Yeah, can we do, although I was late and I did ask for early meeting, it won't happen again, but can we do 9 or 9:30 again? So I can start my,
Yes, anything is fine. Do you have a do either of you have a preference between 9 or 9:30?
I'm more of a 9:30 person myself.
Is that okay, Cicely?
yeah.
All right. So our next meeting then will be at 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday, September 15th. I very much appreciate everyone's indulgence. Getting on a plane for the first time in the pandemic on Thursday the 16th, so that'll be a new experience for me. I'm sure everyone else has done it already a million times.
We did that for the first time, you know.
Oh, just this trip, yeah.
And, it's a drag to wear your mask for so many hours. And plus, we had a huge delay coming home. We were supposed to get in at 6, and we got home at midnight. Because there were big storms.
Yeah, there sure were.
So
Yikes.
that was a long time to mask.
Thanks. But you saw your grandchildren, so on net, probably worth it.
I wasn't going to get here.
Yeah, right. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. Seeing no further business to come before us, the August 30th meeting of the Referrals Committee stands adjourned.